Peter Nygard takes the stand in his own defense.
Tonight, in his own words, what the former fashion mogul is saying at his sex assault trial. Good evening. The details are disturbing, and for the first time in this case, we are hearing from the disgraced businessman himself.
Peter Nygard standing accused of 5 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of forcible confinement. CTV's John Musselman was in the courtroom today and joins us live with the details. John.
Well, Nathan, he was questioned by his defense lawyer, Brian Greenspan, today. He seemed very composed. He's a soft-spoken man. He's 82 years old now, but he did have some difficulty recalling some details with his memory. He couldn't recall the birth date of his daughter. He also couldn't recall right away when he graduated from high school. He even told the jury that his memory has really deteriorated since he turned the age of 78, but he was very quick to deny that he set up any private suites in any of his offices used for sexual purposes. Wearing a dark jacket and white shirt, Peter Nygard spoke in a soft voice. He is 82 years old now. He denied building private sexual suites inside his business properties in Toronto, California, or the Bahamas. Defense lawyer Brian Greenspan showed the photos of the retreats to the jury, and Nygard answered questions about the rooms. Greenspan, was any of the property in the Bahamas intended to be used for secret sexual conduct? Nygard, no, that's insane. Greenspan went on to ask Nygard about the suite he designed at 1 Niagara Street. It was here that the complainants alleged they were sexually assaulted by Nygard in the 1980s right up to 2005. The suite included a mirrored wall-like door with a coded entry. Greenspan, why did you have a coded door? Nygard, security. I did not want people to go into my private office. Nygard spent most of the day on the stand testifying about his upbringing in Winnipeg after his family came to Canada from Finland following World War II. He also spoke about the work involved in building his fashion empire. He called himself a workaholic. He has not testified yet about the alleged sexual assaults. He has pleaded not guilty to 5 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of forcible confinement. Now, he will be back on the stand tomorrow, his defense lawyer continuing to ask him questions about this case. Now, he does open himself up, though, to re-examination by the Crown by taking the stand in his own defense. That cross-examination could come either later tomorrow or the day after. Reporting live from 361, I'm John Musselman. I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, John. Also tonight, an update from police on the tragedy in Sault Ste. Marie. The shooter, accused of killing 3 children and a woman before turning the gun on himself, had a history of intimate partner violence. But first, could drivers soon see more speed bumps and traffic cameras on Toronto streets?
The city is looking at new ways to curb dangerous driving, even speeding through some of the rules to do it. CTV's Natalie Johnson joins us live with those details. Natalie.
Hi, Michelle. Transportation staff are looking to update the road map for road safety, and that could soon mean more speed bumps and enforcement cameras.
City Hall is looking to slow down drivers by paving the way for more traffic calming measures.
I'm not really a big fan of the speed cameras.
It's cost me a lot of money.
Around schools, that would be a good idea.
Toronto implemented its Vision Zero road safety plan in 2017, and in the next 5 years saw a 15% reduction in fatalities and serious injuries on city streets. Now staff are looking to build on that plan by making it easier to add speed bumps and humps to neighborhoods.
There are lots of communities that were built, in the sort of mid-1900s that have very wide streets, and a lot of the folks who live there now really are concerned about speed.
In the last 5 years, the city has installed an average of 185 speed bumps annually at a cost of $4,000 each. The installation takes 1 to 2 days, but to get to that point takes an average of 2 years. Staff propose making more streets eligible and removing requirements for petitions and polling to get it done faster.
Right now it's very convoluted. Sometimes the petition's required, sometimes it's not, sometimes it gets overridden at council. So this just really makes them more streamlined.
Staff also suggest expanding community safety zones beyond school areas, which would enable more automated speed enforcement cameras. There are currently 75 mobile speed cameras in use across Toronto. The city is exploring doubling that number and making them permanent.
Speed kills, we know that. And so the only people who get caught are people who are breaking the law and putting other people's lives at risk.
The goal is to speed up the changes, that would slow down drivers.
And city staff cite one study that found that excessive speeding was reduced by 87% after the speed cameras were deployed. City Council still needs to sign off on the plan. Reporting live, I'm Natalie Johnson. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Natalie. And still to come, slamming the brakes on car theft. More than 1,000 stolen vehicles recovered. The results of a year-long probe. Details on Project Stallion coming up.
But first, let's take a live look outside. It's another mild October evening here in the city. Sunset time, 6:19 p.m. We're getting close to that. Lindsay Morrison is here with a look at the current conditions. Lindsay, we do have showers in some areas.
We do, Nathan, especially the west end of the GTA right now. If you're joining us from Hamilton and around the Golden Horseshoe into Niagara, you're already dealing with some of that wet weather, and more is going to come as we make our way through the evening and overnight hours tonight. Temperature-wise, we are still at 20 degrees in most parts of the GTA. It has been downright balmy. Part of the reason it is so mild, we've got these gusty winds that continue to come out of the southwest, ushering in some of that warmer air from south of the border into our neck of the woods. Here's a look at your evening forecast. Keep the umbrella handy, but you can get rid of the jacket, at least if you're going to be not directly into the rainfall. That's worth mentioning, of course, too. Now, it is possible that tomorrow night could be our warmest late October night on record. We're going to talk about that and the cool down for the weekend coming up in your forecast. For now, Michelle, I'll send it over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, a warning, this next story contains disturbing content. In the Middle East, Israel said today it is preparing for a ground invasion that has been widely expected.
There's been no let-up to the airstrikes in the Gaza Strip as international pressure grows to deliver aid and get people out. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
Rescuers in Gaza scour through rubble after an Israeli airstrike. As they pull this father from the collapsed building, they reassure him his family is alive. Many aren't as lucky. The Hamas-controlled health ministry says more than 6,500 Palestinians have been killed since the start of the war, while UNICEF says more than 400 children in Gaza are either killed or injured each day. Hospitals are near the brink of collapse, in desperate need of fuel to keep generators running. Doctors warn medical centers could soon become mass graves unless supplies start to flow, as Canada and other countries call for a temporary pause to hostilities.
Humanitarian pause is what we're talking about, and it's basically a pause in hostilities to allow humanitarian aid to get to the people who desperately need it.
Israel says it is targeting Hamas militant locations, accusing the terrorist organization of using the population of Gaza as human shields and hoarding vital humanitarian supplies, including fuel. In Israel, the fear for hostages, especially children, is growing. Blindfolded teddy bears, a symbol of the youngest hostages being held by Hamas.
It highlights every day that we're going through. Our hearts are breaking for the parents.
The Israeli Defense Force released new video reportedly showing a Hamas attack from the sea being thwarted, as the country's UN ambassador also lashed out at the Secretary General after Antonio Guterres said yesterday that the Hamas attack came after Palestinians endured decades of repressive occupation.
I think that the Secretary General must resign, because from now on, every day that he is here in this building, unless he apologizes immediately.
Today, Antonio Guterres says his comments in no way supported Hamas.
I am shocked by the misrepresentations by some of my statement yesterday in the Security Council.
Today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated his warning to people in the north of Gaza to move south ahead of a possible invasion. Meanwhile, the Qatari government continues to negotiate for the release of more hostages, with the Gulf state's foreign minister saying today he hopes for a breakthrough soon. Heather Wright, CTV News, Tel Aviv.
In Washington, Joe Biden was asked today if the hostages will be in danger when the Israeli ground invasion begins.
We see they're in jeopardy. The question is whether or not there's any way of getting them out. If we can get them out, we should get them out.
The U.S. president has not demanded that Israel hold off on a ground assault until the release of the hostages can be assured. He says the decision is ultimately up to the Israelis. And there are concerns about an expansion of the war in the region today. Lebanon's Hezbollah group said its leader met with senior officials from Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas. A statement says an assessment was made of what must be done to achieve victory for the resistance in Gaza and Palestine. All three have been declared terrorist groups by Canada.
And as the war in the Middle East rages on and tensions here at home mount, a group of parents is accusing the Toronto District School Board of racism, saying it has to do more to protect Palestinian students. CTV's Mike Walker reports.
I am afraid that my child will not be comfortable saying that he is Palestinian.
Nadine Nasser worries about the safety of her 6-year-old son at school, claiming many Palestinian children at TDSB schools are experiencing an increase in racism, bullying, discrimination, and harassment since the Israel-Hamas war broke out.
In one such incident, a child was interrogated by a principal and 3 vice principals for wearing a keffiyeh, just like this one. He was just wearing a keffiyeh in a social media post.
Nasser is part of a grassroots group of Palestinian and Jewish parents who are urging the school board to address anti-Palestinian racism. The parents are critical of the board's responses to the war.
2 statements explicitly name Hamas's attack on Israeli civilians. None of them, however, mention Israel's attacks on Palestinian civilians, which by this point have killed at least 6,000 Palestinians.
The parents say for 2 years now they've raised concerns about anti-Palestinian racism with the board. They are now demanding the board add anti-Palestinian racism in its equity policy, affirm that students and staff will not be punished for supporting Palestinian human rights, develop resources and training related to anti-Palestinian racism, and partnerships with groups that have a history of perpetrating anti-Palestinian racism, and apologize to Palestinian families for board-wide communications which ignored Palestinian suffering.
The TDSB statements point community members to mental health and anti-hate resources. While some of these resources address anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, none mention anti-Palestinian racism.
The TDSB says it has heard numerous safety concerns from communities, including Palestinian and Jewish students. A spokesperson writing, "We want to ensure that students and staff feel heard through respectful interactions while being sure to stop any form of hate, such as anti-Semitism or Islamophobia in our classrooms. We are focusing on the mental health and well-being of students and staff." The parents have requested a meeting with the TDSB and say they are still waiting for a response. The board says its primary focus at this time is creating an inclusive environment where students feel safe and respected. Mike Walker, CTV News.
To Sault Ste. Marie, where today we learned the man who shot and killed 4 people, including 3 children, had a history of intimate partner violence.
The tragic story striking a nerve with Canadians and reigniting calls to do more to address what is being called an epidemic in this country. CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris joins us live with the details. Siobhan.
Well, Michelle, the chief of police feels much more can be done by law enforcement and in schools to talk about respect and love, but he also feels that declaring an epidemic could be a big help. As Sault Ste. Marie sits in unspeakable sadness over the murder of 4 people, 3 of them children, the chief of police revealed the man believed to have pulled the trigger was no stranger.
The offender has been involved in intimate partner investigations in the past.
Our thoughts are with the community. It's just a terrible loss.
But the Solicitor General sidestepped questions about whether Ontario will reconsider declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic.
Our government has made available over $55 million of grants, and this is something that we are going to continue to make sure that victim services are provided with the grants to help their communities.
It was a key recommendation of a coroner's inquest after the murders of 3 women in Renfrew County outside Ottawa, killed by the same ex with a history of violence. In its official response to the inquest in June, the government said intimate partner violence would not be considered an epidemic as it is not an infectious or communicable disease.
I don't know how they can live with that. You know, we have seen tragedy after tragedy. It's not going to end. We need to address it in a systemic way.
It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done.
Lawyer and women's advocate Pamela Cross was part of the Renfrew inquest. She says declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic would make a difference.
Make it clear that this is a public health issue and that it deserves the kind of financial and political attention
that have been dedicated to crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. but there's symbolic value for survivors, too.
If they found out that they were part of an epidemic, it might make them feel less shame. It might make them feel more able to come forward and talk about what's happened to them and to seek help.
In Sault Ste. Marie, the idea has the support of the police chief.
It's not simply a private family matter. It's a societal matter. And to get it treated that way at a higher level of thinking, then maybe we do need to call it something a little more serious.
To prevent more lives from being cut short.
Pamela Cross is encouraged to see that dozens of Ontario cities have done what the province won't: declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. That includes the city of Toronto. Reporting live from Queen's Park, I'm Siobhan Morris. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Now to the ongoing effort to curb auto theft. Today, Toronto police showed off a haul of more than 1,000 vehicles they recovered from car thieves, laying more than 500 charges in the process.
But as high as that is, figures show it's only a dent in surging thefts that line the pockets of organized criminals. CTV's John Woodward joins us from Toronto Police College. John.
Nathan, we saw Audis, Jaguars, Range Rovers, mostly high-end cars that would fetch high prices on the black market, stolen in Toronto at a rate of more than 32 a day. Carmen Gagliardi's $91,000 Ram truck was only 4 days old when thieves spied it in his driveway. His surveillance video shows within about 30 seconds they're inside.
And you see the way they just came up the driveway, it's like they knew what they were doing.
Maybe because they've had a lot of practice. Vehicle thefts in Toronto continue to surge. 9,747 cars were stolen so far this year. That's more than double the same period in 2019. Some stolen with high-tech equipment, others taken by force in carjackings.
The level of violence being used in the commission of these crimes represents a new and evolving threat to public safety. This level of threat and crime is unacceptable to me as the Chief of Police.
One reason Toronto Police launched Project Stallion last year. Today, officers showed off the haul of more than 1,000 vehicles recovered worth $60 million, an operation that resulted in almost 550 charges against 230 people.
We're a great number that were found that were being shipped to Montreal, Port Montreal. There were a number that were seized here locally.
Others in the process of removing the vehicle identification number, meaning they could disappear into the local market. A major dent in car thefts, but officers realistic that tackling this level of organized crime is not easy.
For the most part, I would say it's the lower end of the spectrum. It's very difficult to get to the head of the snake.
As for Gagliardi, thieves got in but didn't actually take his truck. His secret, an immobilizer.
Honestly, that $2,000, I gotta admit, was the best money I spent.
We went with him to the dealership where they repaired minor damage. And as for whether he'd recommend an immobilizer to others,
100%.
Because unlike thousands, he still has his truck.
So how to get to the head of the snake, as Superintendent Taverner put it. The province announced last week that they've started a joint task force on carjacking, and they say they're working with other law enforcement agencies as long as border guards. But they also say there's no substitute for prevention, including leaving your car inside rather than on the driveway if you can, parking in lit areas. And Gagliardi has nothing but good to say about the immobilizer that stopped his truck from joining those statistics. Reporting live from the Toronto Police College, I'm John Woodward. Nathan, back to you.
All right, thank you, John. The Bank of Canada is keeping its key interest rate at 5%.
We held our policy rate steady today because monetary policy is working to cool the economy and relieve price pressures, and we wanted to give it time to do its job. But further easing in inflation is likely to be slow, and inflationary risks have increased.
The bank says price pressures remain high, so it's not ruling out future rate hikes. The latest forecast suggests slower economic growth and higher inflation in the short term. Increasing costs that come with relentless inflation have taken a real toll on Canadians.
Today, we got more evidence of the financial cost. There has been a dramatic rise in food bank use, in some cases, the highest it's ever been. CTV's Beth McTennell reports.
Single parent Alicia Moore is grateful to visit the Flemington Food Bank. She's one of a rapidly growing number of Canadians over the past year who needs help feeding her family.
What I like is that if there's something that you
you're missing or something that you want to ask them, they give it to you and without any hesitation.
A new report from Food Banks Canada says there were a staggering nearly 2 million visits to food banks this past March. That's up 32% compared to last year and 78% in 2019. 1/3 are children, more than 1/4 newcomers.
Few shelves are empty. What we got Monday, by Wednesday, all gone.
Chadi Abid is the manager at Flemington, which is located in a tight basement space. He says the food bank has seen the dramatic spike in visits. Before COVID, it served around 200 families weekly. Now, 800.
People complain that what you guys giving us is not enough. I totally understand. I try to explain to them that what we have, we try to share with all people. But the situation hard.
The report found the top reasons people accessed a food bank this year were high food costs, high housing costs, low wages, or not enough hours of work. Data shows in 2019, 12% of food bank clients reported employment as their main source of income. That's up to 17%.
How can we accept that this number of people across the country are suffering? What we're seeing is that decades of social policy neglect is now meeting this affordability issue. So we need solutions that address both the income side of the equation and the affordability side.
Food Banks Canada is pointing to Canada's EI program. Developed in the 1990s, it says it doesn't take into account the gig economy.
Before COVID, it was full.
In the meantime, Abid says donations are desperately needed and the families keep coming. Beth McDonnell, CTV News.
The growing auto workers strike in the U.S. may soon impact production on this side of the border. A Canadian union representative has told Reuters the Ford Windsor Annex engine plant could be idled by next Wednesday. That's if there are no changes in the ongoing walkout by United Auto Workers. The Windsor facility has close to 900 employees and produces engines primarily for Ford's Super Duty trucks at a plant in Kentucky that is on strike.
Starting tomorrow, India will resume some visa services in Canada and for Canadian citizens worldwide.
It's good to see that they have resumed that. It would have been nice that they didn't take it in the first place. And as I want to remind Canadians and everybody that there was a Canadian that's killed on Canadian soil, and we've been asking for greater cooperation with the investigation.
Business, medical, and conference applications will be processed in Ottawa and at consulates in Toronto and Vancouver, as well as those for people with family in India. But it's not clear if tourist, student, and journalist visas are also included. New Delhi suspended the services about a month ago. It followed Prime Minister Trudeau's statement about a potential link between India's government and the killing of a BC Sikh leader.
Air Canada has apologized after a British MP was singled out for additional questioning while traveling last week.
When we heard that, we called Air Canada. Air Canada apologized, and apologizing was the right thing to do.
Mohammed Yassin was reportedly challenged at airports in London, England, Montreal, and Toronto while on a trip with a British parliamentary committee. A fellow Labour MP told the UK House of Commons Yassin was asked whether he was carrying a weapon and where he was born. He was eventually allowed to board. The airline says it received a prompt from a government agency to perform additional screening and is required to comply.
Hurricane Otis slammed into Mexico's southern Pacific coast as a Category 5 storm. Acapulco and other communities along the Costa Grande were hit hard. Communication with the area was completely lost. The storm caused landslides and downed trees and power lines. Little is known yet about possible injuries or the full extent of the damage. By late this afternoon, Otis had weakened to below tropical depression strength and was weakening over the mountains.
In New York, Donald Trump was abruptly called to the witness stand and then fined $10,000 today. The judge in his civil fraud trial said the former U.S. president had violated a gag order. Before imposing the fine, Trump was summoned from the defense table to testify about his comment to reporters hours earlier. It was about, quote, a person who's very partisan sitting alongside the judge. All participants in the trial had already been ordered not to comment publicly about the judge's staff.
To Washington, where Republicans in the House of Representatives have finally elected a new House Speaker.
To my colleagues, I want to thank you all for the trust that you have instilled in me to lead us in this historic and unprecedented moment that we're in. The challenge before us is great, but the time for action is now, and I will not let you down.
Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson will get the gavel after a floor vote of 220 to 209 today. There were a few absences. Johnson was quickly sworn into office. He was the fourth candidate nominated to replace Kevin McCarthy, who was ousted earlier this month. Back here at home, it's a big night for sports fans. The Raptors beginning a new season.
And they're doing it on home court, and hope is high as the team begins its shot at a return to glory. CTV Sean Leithong is live courtside at Scotiabank Arena tonight. Great assignment there, Sean.
It is, Michelle. There's no better place to be. Opening night for the Toronto Raptors. There's a real buzz inside the building. You're seeing the Minnesota Timberwolves warming up just behind me right now. This excitement will build, and there's a lot of questions around this team, the biggest one being the team itself.
On opening night, the Raptors season has as many possibilities as there are seats at Scotiabank Arena.
It's promising, I think. So it's going to be better than last year, for sure.
There are high expectations for Pascal Siakam and expected bounce back from Scotty Barnes. Gone are all-star Fred VanVleet and coach Nick Nurse.
I think everybody expects these two losses to really have a big impact on how they're going to perform versus last season. But the reality is they added a lot of pieces too.
There's Dennis Schroeder replacing VanVleet, Darko Rajakovic making his debut as an NBA coach, and then rookie Grady Dick, who will be playing in his first NBA game tonight. He says there are nerves, but
there's a point where, I just get in my head and think, this is basketball at the end of the day, what I've been doing since I was a little kid.
But as 19,000 fans are set to kick off the 29th season of Raptors basketball, some people say that this team might be a bit of a surprise.
As the Raptors flag was being raised at City Hall today, GM Bobby Webster says this will be a new style of basketball.
It's a team-centered style of basketball, and it's, hopefully for the fans to see. It's, share the ball, hit the open man, pass up a good shot to make a great shot.
Standing in their way tonight are the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are a slight favorite. In all, the Raptors are predicted to battle for the final playoff spot in the East.
I personally don't really care about the predictions and stuff like that.
Raps center Jakob Poeltl says this team is coming together quickly and is measuring success in many different ways.
The immediate success, we want to get to the playoffs, we want to make noise in the playoffs.
I'm looking to see what Scotty Barnes does. I think if he can go to the next level, he might be able to get them in the playoffs.
I'm looking forward to this year. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people.
The Raptors did go 4-0 in the preseason, but the real stuff starts now.
Okay, and joining me is a real treasure, superfan Nav Bhatia. What do you think about this season?
This season is going to be an amazing season, and the good part is we are in nobody's radars. Nobody thinks we are going to do good, and that's a good thing for us. We are going to surprise the damn world what we are. We have a very good team.
Playoffs or not?
Oh yes, of course. Playoff, of course. Maybe
you
in
heard
the bottom 8 or 9th in the play-in, but we are going to be in the play-ins. Coach Darko is amazing, and we have Scotty Barnes, who's going to be a monster, and then we have OG, and we have Schroeder, and we have this new kid, Grady Dick. I think we are going to be amazing, man. We are going to surprise the world.
Superfan Nav Bhatia knows best.
The world.
We'll send it back to you. Reporting live, I'm Sean Leithong.
He really is a super fan, the eternal optimist. We love it. Coming up on CTV News at 6, so fed up with the state of family medicine, she's ready to quit. Eye-opening insight from a local doctor, overwhelmed and struggling to keep up with patient needs amid a strained system.
And I'm Pat Foran. Coming up on Consumer Alert. When you're flying, it's frustrating if your flight is canceled or delayed, but if it is, you could be entitled to compensation. When WestJet refused to pay after one of their flights was late, a couple took them to court and won their case. I'll have my reports just ahead.
Another look at what once was Otis. Yesterday morning, Otis was a tropical storm, but it rapidly intensified to a Category 5 hurricane before making landfall in southwest Mexico. Quite astounding. We still have Hurricane Tammy in the Atlantic. It looks impressive on the satellite imagery, but fortunately, this is not a threat to land. Here at home, there's something a little scary in the long-range forecast, and I'm not talking about Halloween. Your local weather forecast is coming up. And stay with us. We've got another full night of great shows for you right here on CTV.
It's an unfortunate part of flying. Cancellations and delays, which could leave you stranded for hours or even days on end.
If the reason's because of the weather, there's not much you can do. But if the airline is to blame, you may be entitled to compensation. Here's Pat Foran and Consumer Alert. Pat.
Nathan and Michelle, a Halifax couple were flying to Toronto last Christmas when their flight was delayed for more than 3 hours. They felt they were entitled to $400 each, but the airline refused to pay. So the couple took them to court and just won their case. Days before Christmas last year, there was stormy weather and many flights were canceled across the country, including Eliza Richardson and Ben Friedrich's flight from Halifax to Toronto. Their flight was rescheduled for Christmas Day. They arrived 3 hours and 45 minutes late.
I wasn't very happy about that, but at least we got Christmas dinner with my family, but we spent Boxing Day morning with my husband's family.
While the first cancellation was due to a storm, the delay on Christmas was not weather-related. If a disruption is within an airline's control and not connected to safety, it must pay compensation of $400 if a flight is 3 to 6 hours late, $700 if it's 6 to 9 hours late, and $1,000 if it's more than 9 hours late. Richardson decided to file a claim.
It was a clear evening. The delay was more than 3 hours. It sort of felt like we hit all the requirements.
WestJet denied the claim twice. Richardson, who was articling to be a lawyer, took the case to small claims court in Nova Scotia. A judge agreed the couple should be paid compensation and ordered WestJet to pay them almost $900. Richardson was pleased to win the case and says the money will go to good use.
Pay down my law school student debt.
It shows that passengers can get justice in small claims court.
The Group Air Passenger Rights says the ruling shows airlines should be held accountable to pay compensation when delays are their fault.
The court really saw what WestJet was doing in practice, that they have been trying to just make up all sorts of excuses just to avoid paying compensation. And the court didn't like it.
CTV News reached out to WestJet, and the airline said it was reviewing the decision but had no comment. Richardson says she encourages others to go to court if they feel an airline owes them money.
If you have the time and the energy and the $100 filing fee, I would say why not give it a try.
And the passenger rights group says the federal government should do more to make airlines pay compensation when they're supposed to, saying Canadians shouldn't have to go to court to get what they deserve. On your side, I'm Pat Foran.
If you have a consumer story idea, email us at alert@ctv.ca.
20 degrees outside at this late hour in October. Goodness.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Yeah. Loving it.
Yeah, many people are. And in fact, this is going to stick around for another couple of days here. But then I think it's going to be a bit of a shock to the system next week, maybe as early as this weekend when the temperature starts to fall. But by next Monday and certainly by Halloween, there is going to be a definite chill in the air. Weather is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train. It's already chilly in parts of Western Canada where the snow continued to fall today, in parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. It continues to be warm in the southeastern United States, and we are benefiting from that. There's a Bermuda high. We've got a southwesterly flow, and as a result, it's still 20 degrees here in the city of Toronto and right around the GTA. Many communities, in fact, made it to 20 degrees or higher this afternoon. We're not talking record-breaking highs here in Toronto. We would have had to make it to about 24 degrees today, but I don't think anyone's complaining. What's interesting is we could experience perhaps our warmest October night, late October night on record. Not tonight. It's still mild at 15 degrees, but that's more so for tomorrow night, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Tomorrow daytime, 21 degrees, 10 degrees warmer than normal. As you can see, we do have showers that are making their way across the GTA at this hour. One little disturbance after another, keeping us generally unsettled. For the most part, the heavier rain is to our north and through cottage country and central parts of Ontario. There's this evening, so just a heads up, especially the closer you are to the shoreline of Lake Ontario. Into tomorrow, midday, we're going to get into some showers. There's going to be drier periods through the afternoon and evening. Overnight into Friday morning, more in the way of wet weather. Friday itself brings some clearing and even some sunshine in the late afternoon and early evening. We're back into showers overnight and into Saturday. Let's talk about the weekend in general, because we go from about 22 degrees, possibly a new daily record on Friday, to 14 degrees on Saturday, only 8 for Sunday. Monday, chance of showers and yes, cool. Look at Halloween. It looks dry at this point, but 5 degrees, overnight low -1. And I don't want to spook anyone, but we've got a chance of mixed precipitation in the forecast for November 1st. That's your look at the weather for now. Nathan, over to you.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. Considered the first black action movie hero, we look back on the life and legacy of Shaft star Richard Roundtree. That's just ahead. The Ontario College of Family Physicians is predicting that by 2026, a quarter of people in this province will not have a family doctor.
Physicians say they're burned out and are calling for more support. Tonight, we have the story of one doctor on the verge of quitting. CTV's health reporter Pauline Chan has more.
They're calling it DocSit, increasing numbers of doctors choosing to leave family practice.
I don't love the medicine. I actually do. It's all that other stuff.
Dr. Nadia Alam has what's considered a small family practice with 600 patients, a career she chose after seeing her father's health troubles, and she tears up thinking about quitting.
To leave family medicine because of paperwork and because of lack of resources feels very much like I'm abandoning my patients.
But she's not alone. The College of Family Physicians says almost half of Ontario physicians plan to leave their practice in the next 5 years, including many family physicians. And many med school grads are shying away from family practice.
They're doing things like obstetrics and gynecology. They're doing anesthesia. They're doing dermatology. Some of them are working in the government. They're doing consulting. A lot are doing cosmetic work.
Dr. Alam says the burden of paperwork is part of the problem.
So I'm filling out this useless form, which has no real purpose other than for me to put in a signature, when I could be dealing with results of blood work, consultation reports, where I could be managing my patient care.
A group called the Ontario Union of Family Physicians has started a petition calling for changes. It points out it costs more than $100,000 a year to run a single family doctor's office, and paperwork is unpaid, taking up to 20 hours a week.
If you consider inflation and rising expenses over time, what they pay us now to run our clinics is 38% of what it used to be historically.
Dr. Ramsey Hijazi says the petition is aimed at Queen's Park, saying eliminating things like doctor's notes for absences and standardizing insurance forms, along with restoring funding for family practices, are a first step. Pauline Chan, CTV News.
Toronto residents can now book appointments to get a flu and COVID-19 vaccine. Toronto Public Health is hosting vaccination clinics at 4 fixed sites across the city, including Cloverdale Mall, Metro Hall, North York Civic Centre, and near Scarborough Town Centre. The campaign began with priority groups such as those 65 and older, residents and staff in congregate living settings, and pregnant individuals. But bookings open today for anyone wanting a shot.
Really now, beginning of November, end of October is the time for us to get boosted with our vaccines so that we're prepared for the surge that is expected later on this fall and into the winter.
The city is also making rapid antigen tests for COVID available for free at all Toronto Public Library branches, in addition to several other dental and health clinics and City Hall and select civic and community centers. You can get a list on our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca. Well, he was a groundbreaking actor who changed the way many people saw themselves on the big screen.
Richard Roundtree starred as Shaft in film and on television and died yesterday. CTV's Andrea Case has a look back on his life. Andrea.
Michelle and Nathan, good evening. There are actors who influence the industry, but Richard Roundtree's influence was not just on the industry, but also on our culture as the movie's first black action hero.
Shaft's his name. Shaft's his game.
Richard Roundtree was only 29 years old when the low-budget R-rated film Shaft, in which he starred, changed his life and the movie landscape forever.
My name is John Shaft. Freeze.
Released in 1971, known as a blaxploitation film, it made Roundtree one of the first black action stars at a time when black actors were not the hero.
Who is the man that would risk his neck for his brother, man?
A streetwise private eye, Shaft was cool and confident, sporting a leather coat.
Shaft. Hotter than Bond, cooler than Bullet.
It was his first film in a career which lasted 40 years. The theme song went on to win composer Isaac Hayes an Academy Award. Shaft spawned sequels, a TV show, and remakes, including 2019's Shaft, starring Samuel L. Jackson in the title role. Roundtree returned as his uncle, and in a post on X today, Jackson wrote in part, "The prototype, the best to ever do it. Shaft, as we know it, is and always will be his creation. His passing leaves a deep hole not only in my heart, but I'm sure in a lot of y'all's too." His manager said Richard's work and career served as a turning point for African-American leading men. The impact he had on the industry cannot be overstated. Roundtree starred in 100 films and television shows. Born in New Rochelle, New York, he was a model before he was an actor. Roundtree was diagnosed with a rare form of breast cancer in 1993. He underwent chemotherapy and a double mastectomy and became an advocate for men's health. A different cancer returned this year. After a short battle with pancreatic cancer, he died yesterday, surrounded by his family. Richard Roundtree was 81. Wow, and he was at TIFF just last year. Now, when I think of that theme song, I can't help but say, they say this cat Shaft is a bad, shut your mouth. Can't resist. How important was the film Shaft? The Library of Congress in the U.S. has reserved Shaft as culturally significant. Reporting for CTV News, I'm Andrea Case.
Stars Tonight is brought to you by Lastman's Bad Boy. Who's better? Nobody.
The issue here is really one of both credibility and reliability of the complaint.
Updating our top stories, Peter Nygard testified in his own defense at his sex assault trial today. The 82-year-old former fashion mogul has pleaded not guilty to 5 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of forcible confinement. During testimony, he said it was insane to suggest that a portion of his property in the Bahamas was specifically designed for secret sexual conduct.
Speed kills, we know that. And so the only people who get caught are people who are breaking the law and putting other people's lives at risk.
The city's looking to build on its Vision Zero road safety plan by making it easier to add speed bumps to neighborhoods. City staff also suggesting expanding community safety zones beyond school areas, which would create more places for speed cameras.
Even though we've seen the struggle on the grounds, on the front lines, to see this number replicated in communities right across this country was shocking.
The annual hunger count report from Food Banks Canada found a record 1.9 million Canadians used a food bank in March. The organization's CEO says warning signals are being ignored as more people turn to food banks. Remember to keep up to date day and night through our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca, and by downloading the CTV News app. And if you have a news tip, photos, or video or breaking news, let us know.
On the markets, the Canadian dollar traded lower 30 points to 72.50 U.S. American benchmark oil gained $1.65 to 85.39 a barrel. And the TSX Composite Index fell 38 points to end the day at 18,947.
Maple Leafs were in action last night facing the Washington Capitals in the third of a 5-game road trip.
Riley back across to Domi. Drops it back to Lundgren. Walks in, feeds across to Riley. Shoots, scores!
Morgan Riley scored his first goal of the season on a power play in the first period, putting the Leafs on the board. Washington would tie it up in the first, but the Leafs scored 3 more, winning the game 4-1. The Buds take on the Dallas Stars tomorrow.
Trapped in a safe place, how a man became locked inside a jewelry vault at New York's World Diamond Tower. That's just ahead.
Tonight, a break from rate hikes, but no break on prices.
Today's forecast has inflation on a higher path than we expected.
The upward pressure on cost of living and the record demand at food banks. Later on CTV National News.
And a reminder, the CTV News at 6 podcast is available as a download every weeknight. And a special hello to those of you listening to the newscast live on News Talk 1010.
Get Toronto's top stories, breaking news alerts, and watch live. Download the CTV News app.
A vault in New York's Diamond District became someone's bedroom last night.
A man was trapped inside the steel-reinforced concrete chamber for about 10 hours. He was trying to access his safety deposit box when an employee closed the door, not realizing someone was inside. The door locks automatically after 7 p.m. So the customer just had to wait until morning when the timing mechanism unlocked the door. Fire and police were in communication with him the whole time and could watch on a security camera, but they had to abandon a rescue attempt because their torches posed a danger to him. Really? Poor guy.
That would be my nightmare. Hopefully it was roomy. Weather-wise, there's a lot to talk about. It's mild. There's also rain to contemplate.
Yeah, so there's a few showers making their way across the GTA right now. Not everyone is going to be impacted the same way. If you're joining us from St. Catharines, for example, you're going to get more wet weather than, say, our friends north of the city in through Vaughan or Stouffville. Wake-up weather tomorrow. It's going to be mild. You probably want to bring the umbrella with you again, even though a good portion of tomorrow afternoon looks significantly drier. 21 is the forecast daytime high. Let's take one more look at the 7-day forecast. Still mild for Friday. We see the temperature start to fall over the weekend, and then it looks pretty chilly for the early part of next week. And yes, that includes your Halloween on Tuesday. Michelle and Nathan.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's it for us, but be sure to join Omar Sachedina tonight at 11 for CTV National News, followed by Zoraida Allman with our next local newscast at 11:30.
In the meantime, our coverage continues anytime on CP24 and online at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Lindsay Morrison and all of us here at CTV News, thank you for watching and have a great night.